Yeah, hi everyone. The topic today is a very ambitious one, how to save a lot of money. So let's say more or less 50% on game development. And by game development, I mean actually game coding. So everything which is somehow related to coding tasks. So any engine, Unity, Unreal, but I guess you got it. But let me start just with a short question. Who is currently using some kind of coding copilot? All right, that's cool. Okay, let's get started. So, very briefly, I've been in games pretty much all my life long. As an avid gamer, started with ZX Spectrum, Atari, Commodore, pretty much everything what was cool at that time. 8086, processors. So it was actually a very nice time, in my opinion. A lot of very cool ideas, a lot of really cool games. I've actually founded and co-founded quite a lot of companies. I was also at some point CEO of the first My.Games Europe, based in Hamburg, Germany, but it was actually a while ago. So right now I'm pretty much fully focused on what I will tell you in a second. This is, by the way, my steel backbone company, which is a company which exists since 17 years on the market. iLogos Game Studios, we are working with a lot of big companies and big clients on different kind of projects. And what we have realized, based on our experience at iLogos and based also on my personal experience, that we see everywhere a big problem. And this problem is basically the crunches. So the crunch times, which are plaguing our industry for many years. I guess all of you at least have heard stories when, I don't know, senior developers are locked in the basements of their offices, literally, and basically have to sleep there overnights just to work as much as possible on the certain part of the game functionality, fixing bugs, to get the game done until the release, because it's all based on a lot of different things like marketing and community and investor expectations and so on and so forth. For the newer paradigm, like game as a service, it's a similar story because you have a very tight schedule of updates, like every 7 days, these days even shorter, every 5 days, in some cases every 3 days, and I guess we will be soon at everyday updates at some point in time. And this issue is not to be solved easily. So you cannot just extend actually your, let's say, senior developers in the way that they magically, duplicate and clone themselves. So we have started to work on a solution how to mitigate and alleviate this problem. Not fully solve it because we are not crazy. I think it's literally impossible to fully solve this crunch problem. It has a lot of different implications, not only in terms of game coding, but also in terms of other departments and in the inner workings and the intersections of them. But we have started to systematically explore what kind of solutions we can use for especially coding, so on the coding side, to augment and kind of enhance our developers in many different ways. And I mean, everyone knows, I guess, that there are some solutions on the market already, like, GitHub Copilot and Gemini Code Assist and some other copilots which are less known, and some new names like Cursor, for example. By the way, it's a very funny story. The company is around since 6 years. They did some weird analytics something, and then they just pivoted and just got 40 million in funding. So it's a nice story for them. Can go also this way. And basically, there is also obviously a possibility how to use LLMs, such as ChatGPT, Claude AI, and many others. You can also use open source LLMs. And those are the possibilities how to kind of enhance the coding process in different ways. The only problem is, which I will tell later, that it's just a very minor enhancement. But let's get, it's a little bit broken, but okay. Let's get to the stats. There was actually a very nice study in Stanford AI Index Report 2024. Unfortunately, they did not include anything like that in the new report, which came out, I think, 1 month ago. But it's still very valid, what you can actually read there. And a very nice fact is obviously that almost all the developers, engineers feel more productive. How much more productive we will discuss in a second. All of them, or sorry, most of them highlighted that they kind of can focus on the more rewarding work, so less tedious and boring tasks, which is a great thing to have, I guess. Also, most of them, almost all of them, 88%, experienced a serious increase in in the speed of the task's completion, which is also great. And 12%, I mean, this figure is not so convincing yet, but still 12% had also higher success task completion if they use some kind of, coding copilots. It's mostly based on GitHub Copilot, actually, all these, stats. And by the way, also a very interesting one is the last figure on the right, that they also spend significantly less time for experimentation. So if you want just to experiment with the code, see what kind of, I don't know, things I can do more in less time, it's also a very great tool how to actually use either coding copilots or LLMs for that particular task. So yeah, I don't know why is it broken. In my version it's not, but okay, let's say it's some kind of miracle. Yeah, there is also a newer statistic. This one is based on Gemini Code Assist, which was just released this summer. I think it was mid-June, something like that. And they also did a lot of tests with some of the companies like Wayfair. It's a big marketplace, e-commerce solution, and so on. Quantipy, Turing, and some others. And basically all of them reported that it helped them a lot to use Gemini Code Assist. And basically, it's also a very convincing, statistics. And in my opinion, that this particular area is not something which is, let's say, a phantom or something like that. It's definitely useful. It definitely drives some value. But there are a lot of things which we will actually discuss further, how this all translates to game development. Because obviously, for us, web development or marketplaces or e-commerce are not really something what we can, make use of. So let's see how this all translates to game development. So basically, just some very basic facts about GitHub Copilot and Gemini Code Assist. I mean, both of them can help to generate some boilerplate code. They can help to generate some small pieces of code. It's more like smart autocomplete. It also depends a little bit which version you will use, because GitHub comes out in 3 variations. It's a simple one, team one, and enterprise one. And the biggest one can do a little bit more than the simplest one. It's actually a similar story with Gemini Code Assist. It can make great use of a huge context window of Gemini, the language model of Google, which is currently at 1 million tokens, actually one of the largest ones. And by that, they can do some particular tasks a little bit more efficient and a little bit more with the understanding of the underlying code for a certain script. And basically, ChatGPT, as I said, it's especially great for prototyping. Some people use it for complex algorithms, let's say something which involves, some complex math, for example. And such things can be done also quite well with the help of ChatGPT. It can help you to get to the speed faster. But now let's discuss what we saw by using all such tools. And by the way, it's not just based on our experience. It's also based on many talks I had with founders of different gaming studios and game companies. And the problem is basically all such tools are not really that effective for game development. So across the board, the average productivity gain is around 5%, so only 5%. It's not something like 30% we saw before, not even 20, it's just 5%. So that's what actually most studios report, these days. And it's also our experience. So it's just some minor help here and there. And there are many reasons for that. So the current tools don't understand the entire project. They don't understand, of course, also all the assets which belong to a project. So let's say in case of Unity, it can be prefabs, can be, I don't know, shader files, whatever. So there are a lot of things which are usually a part of a typical game. So in case of Unity, something like that. So they don't grasp those, let's say, interdependencies. They don't understand the whole picture, and they're completely non-specialized in game development. So in fact, most of them are kind of aimed towards web development, something like JavaScript, Python, Ruby on Rails, PHP, and stuff like that, which is also, by the way, much easier to deal with than, let's say, with a hardcore C++ code for Unreal Engine, let's say, or even C#. I mean, it's also not peanuts to deal with compared to JavaScript or especially Python. I mean, Python is probably the easiest one. And there are no plugins whatsoever which would work in a meaningful way with Unity and Unreal Engine from GitHub Copilot or similar AI coding copilots. So this is also something to let's say consider if a company would like to use some of such tools. So yeah. So basically, we started our own R&D process. It was more than 1 year ago. And basically, we experimented a lot with different tech. So we wanted to finally make it somehow happen and have our own coding copilot, which would be tailor-made for game development. And so was actually Code Maestro born. This is how we named it. After actually several iterations, we came up on this name because in our opinion, it highlights quite well. It's a kind of maestro orchestrating the entire project on the coding side, knowing the assets, which are kind of part of this big orchestra and so on. And we tested it on different things. I mean, obviously, there are a lot of challenges throughout a typical game development process. Multiplayer networking can be really tough, especially if you have something like a massively multiplayer online game. It's a huge part of the entire development, can be extremely challenging, extremely complicated. I've actually developed such a game in my past, so I know what I'm talking about. I mean, sleepless nights and so on. You can expect all of it if you do such a game. Physics can be pretty complex if you go deeper the way to maybe do some more and more complex calculations. Yeah, there are also things like pathfinding for strategy games. AI characters can be very complex. There is, by the way, even one game which is now in the beta, which is based completely on smart AI characters. It's called AI People. If you have not heard about it, I recommend to test, the beta. It was developed by a friend of mine. Good AI is the company behind it, and it's a very nice experiment, something like Baldur's Gate, but with completely autonomous AI characters. So it's a nice experiment, in my opinion. So yeah, and there are shaders, there is gameplay logic, there are many other parts, and basically what the time is usually spent on is on coding, testing, bug fixing, of course, optimization. Obviously, the optimization has to be also done for different platforms separately, for mobile devices, for consoles, for PC. So like different parts. The platform-specific parts, they can be also quite tough to deal with if a company doesn't have any experience with a new console or new platform. And it's obviously also porting, which is exactly the thing where you need actually also platform-specific parts. You need to rewrite some of the UI, UX, logic, and so on. So what we have now, we have actually developed the initial version of the product, which was, by the way, just finished literally 2 weeks ago. We got finally into the MVP stage, which we consider feature complete for the first iteration of the product. And it's still in closed beta, by the way. So it consists of 2 major parts. So there is one interactive knowledge database, which kind of accumulates all the knowledge from a certain project. And right now, the tool is focused especially on the Unity projects. It can work with Unreal, but right now we just officially support Unity because we can also deal really well, now with all the different asset files and understand all the structure of a project, of a Unity project, and so on. And obviously, the advanced coding assistant, which can make use of this interactive knowledge database, has a lot of improvements and adaptations in regard to especially game development, game coding, and especially again for Unity. So that's #1 platform for us right now. And it can also, by the way, help obviously with bug fixing, with code optimization, refactoring. It can help really great with navigation. So for example, if you have a legacy project or if you have a new team member and you don't know where to start, so you have your own personal senior developer sitting next to you and explaining you really meticulously and extremely, patiently how this game is constructed. So let's say you can ask it, how is the battle system in this RPG game is developed. Then it will explain it to you in the very detail, including all the specifics, which classes, which methods, how they interact, how the interfaces are built around them, and so on and so forth. So you can go deeper and deeper and deeper, get a ton of useful information, which will cut basically your onboarding time to almost zero, because actually this senior developer is 24/7 next to you and can immediately, provide you the jump start into the project. Yes, so, and obviously it can write code, it can also modify code. So those were, the initial reasons why we actually started all that. There are some shortcomings, I have to say. So to generate a huge part of code at once, this is something what is not an easy task at all, and we are still working on this part to make it more solid and more stable in how it works internally. But other than that, so there are a lot of things which do work, in a really great way. And I will tell you in a bit how much better we are compared to any other, AI coding copilot or any other LLM on the market. So yeah, just to put here some examples. I mean, they're quite, trivial, I guess, but so it can also work with someone who is maybe not really a coding person. So for example, a game designer with some technical, knowledge and some understanding of Unity can also experiment with a game, let's say, and do by himself some kind of adaptation of game features, and then building his own version locally, let's say, and seeing how it actually all performs without even dragging the engineering team out of the process and so on. So yeah, obviously it also speed ups massively, especially routine tasks, boring tasks, things which you would actually be forced to get out of the context for maybe a more complex task, to maybe do something which should actually take only 1 minute. And then in several cases, we saw that such tasks can actually require you, let's say, up to 20 minutes, where the pure processing time is actually 1 minute. And only due to this, let's say, getting out of the context, being in a new context, searching for files, thinking about, oh damn, where was actually this piece of code, and so on. And all of it can be sped up massively. We saw the speed increase up to 15x for such tasks. And actually, I think it's also a very convincing metric. Then obviously it can be also something for tech artists. So our tech artists on the test project, they also saw a significant increase, because obviously shaders are a mess. They're very hard to deal with, especially for tech artists, which are per se not really developers. They're kind of a mix of both, artists and developers. And it can massively speed up their operational speed and basically getting to some result, which they, let's say, fine tune and polish a little bit and get basically the things done in a much more faster fashion. Yeah, so basically I've put also this nice slide, which can be a little bit too much at once. But so what is actually important to consider here is just that Code Maestro is really the only tool right now for game development which can accomplish a range of things that cannot be accomplished by any other tool on the market. And we have tested actually all that we are actually aware about. So there are obviously some new tools like Cursor, which just came out, and so on. But according to our tests, we are beating everyone else completely. And the gain, how much we are better than any other, is not by something like 10%, it's X time better. So depending on how we test it with which kind of feature set and so on. It's at least twice of the quality and the result what we have seen from other tools. And the record, I think it's something like 40x. So if you compare a simple GitHub Copilot version, the simplest one, with Code Maestro, the gain is indeed in the range of 40x in terms of the quality of the outcome. And we have actually our own testing data set, which can be also called evaluation data set, where are a lot of different tasks for a typical Unity game developers. So it has around 100 different tasks for different kind of things, architectural tasks, code editing tasks, code writing tasks, navigational tasks, and so on. So we have actually put everything there, what we consider important to get a good picture, how much better or maybe worse we are. And the result is really overwhelming. We were actually surprised by ourselves that we are performing so much better. But what is to highlight here is probably those 4 initial rows. So in our case, we can store everything what is of sensitivity on the client side. So the knowledge database, the assets, the code, and so on can be stored completely locally. We just need to get some interaction with our core of the engine, of our engine, let's say. But actually, all the data is preserved. On the client side, obviously, as I said, we know how to generate or modify code based on the entire architecture, even including prefabs, asset files, and so on, which is also a really big gain in terms of how well the solution starts to work if you also throw all this data into it. Obviously, we are the only one solution which is really focused only on game development, literally solely and fully. And we integrate more and more things. So right now we have alpha versions of Rider plugin, of Visual Studio plugin, of Visual Studio Code plugin, and also alpha version of Unity plugin. The beta version, which is actually almost feature complete, is the Web IDE, which is kind of which can be used for any kind of thing. So, and especially most of the coders, they do have 2 monitors, so it's not a big issue to work on the right with the, let's say, Web IDE, on the left with the actual, let's say, IDE or engine, whatever. So that's not a big deal. And this is basically what we put especially as a highlight here. And I mean, this is all, I think, self-explanatory. Why all this? Obviously, our goal is to make developers much more productive, to kind of clone your development team and having them twice as productive. Our goal is actually a very ambitious one. We want to get to 10x of productivity, which is extremely ambitious. It will not be like satisfied or completed in the near future for sure. But I guess we can get there with some things along the road, like also the improvement of the LLMs and so on and so forth. And obviously, game companies can obviously save time. Save time and money on this particular game development process in many different regards. So we are not there to, let's say, cut the costs in terms of, let's say, firing the employees or laying off half of the development team. Definitely not the case. So the cost saving is really for total cost of ownership. So how much cheaper you can actually create some piece of, let's say, functionality for the game or the entire game or some updates or some DLCs, whatever. So it's all gonna be cheaper because you just need less time. So you can do more. You can do more updates, you can create more games, you can create more features and so on. So that's our goal, not to fire any people. And actually, I'm really sad that so many people lost, their jobs in the last 2 years. It's a horrible thing for the entire game industry, and we definitely don't want to drive it further. So yeah, that's actually it. You can sign up for our beta. Right now we are releasing the beta access very slowly because we still have some onboarding stage. So it actually means for us that we need to deploy some of our team members separately on the company by company basis. For now, it's in the enterprise approach. We will also have a single user freelancer / indie developer approach, which to be expected next year. I don't think that we can make it magically happen until end of this year, but it's definitely in plan. You can expect that we will appear on all the stores like Unity Store and Unreal Engine Store and so on. But that's all what is actually on the list for the next year. So for now, we have like more urgent priorities, but still, as I said, we will be definitely releasing the access for all the companies on the wait list step by step. So that's it. In case of any questions, happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Alexander. Do we have any questions? Oh, we have a lot.
Yeah, thanks for the lecture. You mentioned somehow that this orchestrator will work on the project context based flow, yes. Right? Mm-hmm. So how would it technical work? Would it need to like some initial scan of the project or?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, exactly. That's actually the onboarding stage that there will be actually a scan of the entire Git repository and any kind of additional files which belong to the project. Depending on the complexity of the game and on the project, it can take from several hours to several days. For the bigger games, it will be definitely several days. Let's say a console Unity game, for sure. So at least 2 days of the entire scanning, like forming the knowledge database and so on. So it's a very intense and computationally intense process to get this entire thing packed and done in this way.
Yeah, and may I ask another question, but related, and where this information is stored? Like it's local for the per PC, or do you need to stop some server?
Yeah, so basically, as I mentioned, we can do both. We can host it on our site. For some of the game companies, it's completely fine according to our talks, but some of them do insist on the on-premise hosting, so it's also fine with us. So they can host it in their own, private cloud, along with all the project files, assets, whatever. So it's kind of two things are definitely possible, and for us, it's just a matter of, let's say, how to coordinate it with our engine core, which can do both local hosting and our hosting.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, thank you for the lecture. One of the slides says something about integration with IDEs and so on. So how does the integration work exactly? Does it have all the stuff like line completion, extra chats, or generating code and so on?
Yeah, it's pretty much, it's going to be very similar to how, GitHub Copilot works in the way how it's integrated in the IDE. So as I said, it's still in the alpha version because we focused first on the web IDE, but it will be definitely very similar and to expect how you would actually see it in case of GitHub Copilot.
So I assume that you're also looking at adding integration to Rider?
Yes, of course. Yeah, Rider, Visual Studio Code are the 3 IDEs we will be actually pursuing in the very near future. And as I said, they are in the alpha right now. But then we can actually maybe start also looking outside of those 3 IDEs. I mean, there are a lot of code editing tools, besides of them. We just don't feel that it makes so much sense because most of the game developers, we know they work either with Rider or Visual Studio, in some cases Visual Studio Code. So those 3 are the main choices usually.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Could you please raise hands because we have lots of questions.
Hi, thank you for the lecture. I was wondering about the improvement of the models, since you said that it's deployed locally and no data leaks or anything. How do you plan to improve the models without using users' information?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So there is one important aspect to consider. Even though we can also theoretically deploy the LLM itself in the local storage, or let's say local cloud, in the usual case, it will be actually stored on our side. So there will be, of course, some processing of data, and then there is a choice by any company if they want us to allow the logging to improve their own, let's say, operations. So we can then look with our support team in case when they put a dislike, button, what exactly was actually not good with that query. Or we can also omit the logging, and the companies will actually be without this possibility from our team to look more precisely into the queries where they actually did not like the results. Both things are possible, but that's actually the only thing which is being transferred is basically the result, the query and the result. So there is, if you want, some minor, let's say, privacy leakage in a way, but it's next to impossible to do it somehow else. At least our engineers, told me that any other way would be pretty much a nightmare for us to deal with. So this part, remains. But the actual crucial part for all the game companies we have spoken with, even the biggest ones like Ubisoft and ZeniMax and some others actually, because we have more than 30 companies now in the waitlist, Sega and so on. For them, it's important that it's hosted locally when it comes to really the parts of, let's say, code project and the actual knowledge database, not really this transmission of small pieces of data. And we don't train our model on any customer data. It's on plan that we will make a version of a system which would allow for every customer to get an additional fine-tuning of the model on their own data. But it will be done in a separate manner, so it's not mixed up, that we are kind of, getting all the data from the customers to improve the overall model. It's not going to happen. We are very sensitive in this regard, and we will not do this for sure.
Sasha, thanks a lot for the pitch session. May I ask you about the use case number 3 you showed us with the shaders and the technical artists? So could you please try to explain how complex these suggestions can be? So let me give you an example. If you will ask ChatGPT, please help me, guide me to create a volume sand effect in Unity. You will quickly realize you have to work with particle systems, you have to work with physics, you have to work with rendering, you have to create shaders, as well as you have to create at least 3 dozens of different type of assets inside. As well as after that, you have to combine it together. So I would say that these examples, as well as any kind of complex VFX, it's impossible to use any kinds of LLMs. As well as for like Gemini, of course, it's impossible. Could you please guide how Code Maestro working with a complex request, where you have to not only write a code, you have to create a code, you have to create assets, you have to combine it together, as well as, especially for assets creation, you have follow some guidelines. How you can have to create.
I mean, obviously, our tool is very strong, but it's not pure magic, so we cannot, at least yet, create any assets on the fly. So this part would be still on the shoulders of the, let's say, technical artist. So what I was, referring to is basically the actual shader logic in the way of shader, coding, which is pretty much a mess. I mean, everyone who has ever looked at the shader code, so that it's not very easy to understand. It's not very easy to, grasp. And it's not something, like a Python code, let's say. So we are focusing on that part. So not that we can create like everything at once and basically, let's say, package everything in one final artifact, which would be given to the technical artist. It would be great. So maybe at some point we're going to do it, but not now. So for now, only code-wise and with inclusion of the assets, which are kind of prepared beforehand and where the system knows that they exist and the technical artist can refer to them as well. So in his, or her, queries and so on and so forth.
Any more questions? Yeah, we have a break after this panel, so I guess we can deep in this time.
Sorry for asking another question.
No problem.
But the last question made me want to ask. I noticed that in several of the tools, at least the ones I used, when there's no real solution to the question that you're asking, the AI kind of starts getting confused, and it doesn't know that it doesn't know, and it suggests you a lot of like irrelevant stuff, and maybe sometimes sends you to a rabbit hole. That's like a waste of time. Does this tool is it better at addressing these issues?
It's a very good question, and I will be cruelly honest. So there are some shortcomings in the very nature of LLMs, which are impossible to solve right now with the current technology. And the main issue is non-determinism. So if you have the temperature of a model above 0, it will be always non-deterministic, which means that sometimes it can provide you less good answers. Sometimes it can also hallucinate, based on probability distribution of its internal, let's say, model. And this is something which every LLM, every coding copilot have to live with, because nobody actually could figure out how to fully get rid of it. So the thing is that obviously we are seeing that the quality of the replies, as I said, are indeed much better, but this doesn't mean that the quality is 100% for every query. This is unfortunately at this moment is fully impossible to realize. And maybe you've heard that ChatGPT or OpenAI released yesterday a very powerful new model based on a totally different, inner workings. It's called GPT-01. So it's very fresh. It was actually released probably 12 hours ago. And this is based on a different approach. This is based on a very deep reasoning approach. The shortcomings there is that it takes a lot of time to reason properly. It takes a lot of tokens. It will be extremely expensive to use this model, but it's something new. And my expectation is that all the models will go in this direction. So probably 1 year from now, we will see a very deep reasoning capability. So right now, this new model shows that it can reason on a level of a PhD and postdocs, people. It can reason in very highly complex math problems. It can also reason for very complex coding problems. So we will definitely also use, this model once it's available to use. Right now, it's impossible. So there is no API access unless some certain, early adopters. And this is also something where I expect will be a big part of the future in terms of more complex task solution, more complex part of code generation, and so on. But as I said, it's very new, it's very fresh. Let's hope that it will actually finally, relieve us from all those hallucinations and all the current problems which the current tool actually have.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this is the most questions I've seen for the panel in a couple of years, I guess, and other sections, but I believe we need to wrap up. Alexander, thank you very much for the speech.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's give a round of applause.
Thank you.